Hi, I'm Mark Anthony Tierno, author of Maldine, Cyberdawn, and Spectre Flatfoot, Line of the Hive, and I'm here with another writing tip. Today, I'm going to talk about magic in your story. Now, fantasy worlds just about always have the one thing in common, and that's they have magic. but but the trick is, how does a writer go about using that in a story? It is enough to simply say the wizard does his hocus pocus and does whatever it is that the writer needs him to do. And if someone bothers explaining or finding a piece of logic, he just shrugs his shoulder and says, it's magic, who knows? My take on this is everything needs its own logic. Its own internal consistency, even magic. I view the use of magic as being akin to another force in the universe. And as such, there are certain rules and everything that apply. Most of these are common sense rules. What the writer has to do is decide on what this internal logic is before he starts writing and before he has his wizards casting spells. These laws and rules you use will then solve the problem of the story of a wizard being able to do just anything that comes to mind, anything arbitrary and whatever, never get tired or whatever, because you need, if you don't have that sort of limit in a story, then you really don't have a story. And if you don't make the limits logical, if they're arbitrary, then anybody with a half a brain on their shoulder is just going to be calling foul. So these rules, such as the writer will use, they'll have those limits you need and can also hang a few juicy plot elements on. The ones I use are derived from common sense. I view a wizard as being like to an engineer or a physicist, and the magic spells they cast would be the equivalent of equations to be solved. The manipulation of magic is used in place of whatever devices an engineer would use. But to manipulate such forces, because remember, the mind would not be the source of all these grand forces, but a conductor of it, or sort of like a transistor. It's manipulating far more energy than it has inside of it. As such, this gets a bit tiresome. It requires a lot of mental effort for the wizard to keep manipulating such cosmic forces. So after a while, he gets tired. The greater, the more powerful the spell, then the more tired he gets. Unless he has a focus like a wand or a staff or something that, to help him along, then he's going to have to rest after a while. More skilled, experienced wizards would have more experience in more different efficient ways of manipulating this energy so they don't get tired as fast, and so that would give rise to the apprentice wizard or the low-level wizard tiring out faster, and the experienced master doing far more with far less effort. He just knows what he's doing. And this also gives a reason for why do wizards have staffs or wands. It's not the source of their power, it's just to focus so they don't have to put as much effort into it. And so one plot element you could have, say if your wizard loses a staff or his wand gets broken, he can still do his magic. It's just going to take a lot more out of him, and that could feed into your plot. So the writer now has a reason for spellcasters in his story, to have them and not be so constantly using magic 24/7, because otherwise it'd be like jogging in place the entire day, and you can't do that with just wearing out. After that, there would be limits on exactly what the magic can do. Uh, Aside from the obvious of, the more learned wizards can perform these amazing feats. Um, the, and and the lesser, you have the basic scale. The more advanced wizard can do more advanced feats. But uh, other than that, what are some of the limits you can throw in? One I do is divide magic into different fields. So just as engineers and physicists have their own specialties, so does magic have its specialties. You can have your general practitioner mage that knows a lot, or that knows a little about a lot of things. but uh, but for some things, like in anything else, he requires specialists, like a general practitioner doctor as compared to a surgeon or an internist. So you can suppose in your world that there are different specialties of magic, and hence different different types of wizards that can handle them. For instance, the more common thing would be elemental magics. Fire, cold, wind, earthquakes, whatever. And then there's a different sort of magic that your average enchantress or witch would use. Where you have your charm spells and your curses. Those will obviously be completely different from elemental magics. So while you can have a mage perhaps recognize, that is a sort of bad magic that only witches use, he wouldn't be able to do anything about it because it's not his field. Or if there's, in my own stories, one of the specialties I have is time and space magic, and I have a rare breed called a temporal mage. And in the Maldine series, there are a couple temporal mages that eventually show their heads, but they are exceedingly rare. And they deal with, speeding up time, slowing down time, traveling back through time, stretching space, all sorts of things like that. And that's another example of how a specialty, when you divide it into specialty, you can also generate some interesting plots. So, as a writer, you have to decide what the available kinds of magic in your world are. You can have necromancy, healing, as I mentioned, elemental magics, demonic conjurations, that sort of thing. But for your story, you may not want to use the entire span of different types of magics. Either maybe there's some type of magic that's just sort of poorly conjured on your world for whatever reason, or there's some that's just frowned upon, like necromancy. It's like, oh, we don't do necromancy, that's really bad stuff. Or perhaps there's even like certain focuses on the world, certain areas that where certain types of magic are more easily done than others. Like a necromancer, that'd be why they're hanging around graveyards and in holy places. But a shaded glen in the middle of a forest, that could be the only place where you have nature magics going on. So just decide on the specialties of magic that you want, and that basically whatever fits in your story. Perfect example of this is the animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender. There they use exclusively what amounts to different forms of elemental magics, and it works out great. And even on the elemental magics, they have subspecialties in there, and you've got an entire plot able to revolve just around that. For other stories like I have, as I mentioned, you could have a certain cult of witches around, and they're the only ones that are using enchantments and perhaps necromancy and things like that. It's a synergy. The plot elements that you desire will determine what types of magic are available, and it's certainly other types of magic will inspire more elements for your story. Another limitation you can use in magic is sort of like Newton's laws. For every magical action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So bringing forth a large ball of fire in one place, elsewhere a volcano might suddenly lose a little bit of its heat. Or if you summon forth a demon to do your bidding, then someplace is going to be an angel there whose eyes suddenly pop open and find there's evil afoot, and the conjurer said demon has an angel or something, or some other holy force chasing after. There's also the karmic aspect. Too much necromancy might make you an undead yourself and looking more and more like a lich. Or say if you use a spell, and there was actually an old Twilight Zone episode that was based on this, though it involved a potion. But say if you use a spell to make someone love you, then the wizard might be getting too much of a good thing. Way too much of a good thing. An example that I've written about in my own stories, there's a conjurer named Bador. He's into conjuring forth demons, and he's always trying to increase his power. He's sick of the world, so he goes off and does his own studies. He gets into a habit of conjuring up demons and then sapping out their power for them to become the big, powerful wizard he wants to be. Problem is, apparently when you leech off the power of a demon, you gain certain demonic-like qualities without having any of the benefits. So like one cloven hoof, for instance, or little half-grown horns across his body, or in his case, he has these little tiny, I'm talking like 6-inch little miniature wings on his back that are good for nothing but just making him appear as a rather undesirable person. And the more the story goes along, the more power he saps, the more of these demonic-like features he has that just get in the way of his life and make him appear worse and worse. But of course, he doesn't gain any of the abilities of a demon. You know, from that he doesn't have useful wings or anything like that. So it becomes something that adds to his personality and makes him more and more of a loner. The last thing is to decide how widely available is magic in general in your world. Should it be as common as electricity as an art at times? Or should it be a somewhat rare thing like on The Lord of the Rings, my impression, there's that magic isn't all that common in the context of the story. You have Gandalf casting maybe like 4 spells in the entire series, you know, light spell and some other things. Or there's other series out there where, you know, everybody has at least a little bit of magic. I believe it was the Thomas Covenant series. Even villagers knew how to make a rock glow and at least have, you know, good nighttime light or a source of heat or something. So you have to decide, is it something only the privileged few can use? Is the force rather weak in the world, except in, as I mentioned, certain natural focal points where it's particularly strong? Or is it as common as turning on a light switch? If you have the necessity of using naturally occurring magic focal points, that could also add an element of risk, depending on where it's located, to inspire the characters for a quest. If there's a spell or a magic item they need to work to fend off the big bad, and it involves a type of magic that's only available, you know, slightly to the left of Mount Doom, and that's where they have to go, where that type of magic is strongest. Now, it really shouldn't take the writer long to decide how magic works for your story and on your world. All you have to do is just sit down and think about it and start jotting down notes. Keep in a small notebook so you don't forget, arrange it so it's easy to reference, and just remember just internal consistency. make the rules logical, make them follow from one to the other, not just anything arbitrary. Maybe there is some sort of background reason for this that the characters won't be discovering until like about the fourth or fifth book. Things that may seem arbitrary until you fit them into the greater pattern that they discover later on in the stories. Either way, the point of all this is to add a bit of realism. And yes, the words realism and magic in the same sentence sound like a contradiction. But the idea on selling your story is if you get the background of the world and everything about it as believable as you can, then people become emotionally involved in the story because, okay, the world seems real enough, the characters are real, I'll buy into whatever it is that they're going through. So like in your world, if magic exists, this is what it would be like, and here are the reasons. And this will engender the suspension of belief necessary for them to, get into your story and make you a better writer. That's all for today's writing tip. Keep reading.